Hey guys, welcome back to Community Starcraft 2. I'm your host Magnet, and we're talking about fast expanding in PvP today. And basically we're going to be talking about the different timings you need to look out for, scouting properly, and of course getting your expansion up safely. And we should mention that the whole point of this is to give you guys a safe build that really challenges you against the different things people can do in PvP. So if you really want to get better and you really want to play later stages of PvP, rather than running all-ins and whatnot, consider running stuff like this, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to safely do that. So we'll go ahead and jump into the game, and I'm pressing the wrong button, of course. So in this game we're going to be taking a look at Bling, who is the blue Protoss, and he's fighting Stardust. And we won't pay too much attention to the openers, but we'll really pay most attention to the player that's going to be fast expanding, and that's going to be Bling. So we'll show you guys the different things that he does and what to look out for. So obviously the same openers apply that we talked about in the openers video, and actually one of the openers that we talked about in the openers video does get you into a fast expand. So if you want to know, or at least get an idea of an opener you can use, it's explained a little more, you can go back and check that out. But Bling's going to go double gas. You can go single gas, but that does make you a little bit more predictable and linear. So I would opt for this double gas. It's going to go 2 out of 3 in each gas. Of course, core right after the gateway. One other thing you can do that's kind of cool is you can hide this second pylon. We'll see that in a different game. It does throw off opponents that are better at scouting, so it is kind of a cool play that you can use, but Bling is obviously not using it here. The scout for Stardust is in here, though, so he sees everything that's going on. So first of all, he needs to get something out to push away the probe, so the probe doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't just get all in right away. So he's going to produce a mothership core and a stalker right away. The mothership core is probably your most useful tool in holding most of this stuff off. So once the stalker and mothership core are out, you can deny scouting pretty reliably. You can see Stardust probe is already walking away because he doesn't really know what's going on. Or rather, that's the idea, is you want to keep him in the dark. And what Bling is scouting for here, Bling wants to continue to scout over and over for something like a Stargate. So if he can come in here and see this Twilight Council, he'll feel really good about his expansion. The second thing is that if you ever get into a point where you have to give up your Nexus, then that's a viable choice. And most of the time than not, you're going to have to give up your Nexus against the Stargate, or just cancel it, or never mind from it, or whatever. So if you can see what's in there, that's going to be a big tell. Something like a lot of gateways is okay. Twilight Council is probably your best bet when running this build, because this build does well against DTs and against Blink. So that's what you want to see if you can find that out. So we're going to watch Bling's probe here. We'll fast forward just a little bit. Bling does get pushed away a little. So he could have tried to go back in there, but he probably would have gotten caught by the stalker. So he's just going to play this a little blind. But his Nexus goes down now. And notice that he only has a couple of units on the field. He has 1 sentry, 1 stalker, and this mothership core. Unless he canceled his stalker. No, it's right here. And he wants to deny scouting here. So if you can deny scouting of this probe for as long as possible, then that's going to be perfect. And secondarily, you can scout around the map with this stalker, try to see if you can catch any proxies or anything like that. Again, go back and watch the scouting video for PvP if you need any help with things like that. So now that he pushes that away, the sentry could have easily killed it, and he wouldn't have seen what's inside the main. Bling can send his probe back in here in just a little bit, and I'll explain something about that in just a second. So he's sending out a stalker right now, trying to get a count as far as what Stardust stalker count is. He does see just the 1, and he walks it back. And what he's looking for is he's looking to see if there's any sort of aggressive advancement here from Stardust. So with this expansion build, by the way, this is not the mothership core that he wants to see. Whoops, that's the wrong button. This is Stardust mothership core just scouting out and seeing what's going on. So yeah, Stardust has a good idea of what's happening, but Bling needs to know what the posture is with Stardust's army right now. So if Stardust's army is forward and being aggressive, then he'll know that he needs to be very much on top of his unit production, and more importantly, he needs to produce out of the robo that he's got on the way, which is right here. He needs to produce immortals, and that's going to be what's going to kind of dictate what to do with this robotics facility. So his build so far was just putting a Nexus down with only a couple of units. He had a stalker, sentry, and mothership core, and then robo immediately afterward, and you're going to cut probes for quite a while and get up to 3 gateways. You're going to be on 3 gateways in a robotics, and the idea is you want to determine how to produce off of this robo. So if you can get your probe back in and see where his army is, if your probe can walk all the way in, that'll mean his army is obviously heading towards your base, and you're going to need to defend that, so probably Immortal first is better. But if he's back at home, maybe he has an expansion, you're going to want to go Observer first off of that robo. So Bling is going to send his stuff back in. He'll notice that there is a probe heading out for Stardust right now. This Stalker is still back here. So the fact that there's a probe coming out, maybe he can see whether there's a Nexus or not, and he does not see a Nexus. So that means that he needs to be really on top of defending right now. And this should probably start off with an Immortal. I doubt it's going to be starting off with an Observer, considering he really doesn't need a protection. Yeah, there's the Immortal right now. So he needs to protect this at pretty much all costs. And note that it is early enough so that he can overcharge this outer Nexus. And if you can overcharge the outer Nexus, and if you have force fields to keep them outside of your main, that means they have to eat all this damage from the Nexus, and you don't necessarily have to mine from there right away. You can just keep all of your mining back in the one base and just wait for him to expand if you want to keep this up. So this is kind of a defensive beacon, as well as your advantage throughout the next stage of the game. If they just go ahead and expand and accept that they're behind, then you can do whatever you want. You could even be more aggressive on two bases, since you're going to have more economy and therefore more units. So in this case, Stardust is just going for Blink, and Bling knows about that. So typically, with this type of unit composition, you don't want to wander all the way down here to try and defend yourself. You typically want to sit more back here and be ready to protect against blinks that will happen over here, maybe something weird like a Warp Prism, and come down here really only if you need to. But the overcharge is really what makes this work, so be ready to overcharge over here at a moment's notice. The other thing you should know is that if they're going for Blink, they won't really have Blink done until about 7:30ish, maybe a little bit earlier. So that's when you know when you need to start worrying about that, assuming they're showing a lot of aggression. Of course, if they just expand, then there's nothing you really need to worry about. But the Immortals coming out here, the extra gateway production, as he does have a third one on the way now, as you can see. Those are going to be the keys as far as holding this type of attack. So we're going to see Stardust try to position a little more. And don't be too antsy and throw down this Nexus Cannon if you don't need to. Only throw it down if you absolutely need to hold off the attack. So once the second Immortal is out is basically when you can start defending this really well. And that's about when Blink is going to finish up. So if you have two Immortals against Blink, you should be in great shape as long as you use your Guardian Shield, assuming you have energy for it. So there's a sentry that has it right now. And assuming you're spending all your money and warping it as well. So we should see Bling actually put this away pretty easily. He's going to lose a couple of probes here. But even still, notice how he's staying kind of in the middle between his two bases so he doesn't get multi-pronged. And now you see the Blink player is being really annoying coming back in here. So this is when you want to drop your overcharge. But the fact that he was still fairly close means that he can still defend it. So this is one big thing with these expands, is you don't want to get ripped apart by going all the way down here and having him blink into the main and you not being able to catch up to him. Just kind of stay in the middle here and defend your two bases so that he doesn't really have a good avenue of attack. And really, there's only a reason to overcharge the outside Nexus. Overcharging the inside doesn't make a lot of sense. And eventually, if he tries to get aggressive against this many Immortals, he's going to be in pretty rough shape. So you can see he's actually pushing this back fairly easily. And he can just continue to produce Immortals here, and as long as he keeps the Immortal production going, he should eventually be able to push this away and get a big advantage and eventually win. So we're just going to keep heading out here, and there's still two Immortals. The Zealots are okay. The Zealots are going to tank some shots here, but typically Immortal Stalker is going to be the best thing to hold this off. You can see he's trying to balance it out a little bit based upon where his resources are. So I'd say Immortal Stalker is probably much better. So the Zealots come down here, they don't really do much. Immortal is still trying to get some shots off here, and you can see the longer this goes on, the further and further ahead Bling gets. And he is producing probes intermittently, maybe every once in a while. You don't want to go crazy producing probes if you're trying to protect against this. The whole advantage that you have is if they go home, you have your second Nexus already done, so you should be able to get ahead at least a decent amount in probes. So the fight's still coming down here. The Immortals should be targeted on the Stalkers the best you can. Just let the Zealots kind of hit whatever they want. You could even micro these Stalkers away if you had the attention span, but at this point, this is held. This is totally held, 29 to 26 workers. Bling has a second Nexus and Stardust doesn't. It's eventually getting to the point where he can actually just push out and start to push them away really hard here. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So Stardust tries to blink on top of the Immortal and see what he can get done, but that was proving to be a not very wise choice, as Bling just easily defeats that, and he's going to win this game. So that's kind of the basics of it. We're just going to take a look at a couple of other replays, because I know that these can be pretty hard to use as soon as my game gets back to it. There we go. Because I know these can be pretty hard to use, and you do need to know maybe some little tricks here and there, but mostly just seeing this in action and being able to copy it is how people are going to be most successful with this. So we're not going to see too much different. Maybe a couple of different unit types and different ways in which they get there, but for the most part, these are going to be all pretty much the same. So this is SOS and Zest. Zest is the player that's going to be opening up with a fast expansion. And on this map in particular, there's going to be maps where you have a backdoor expansion. I know there's even a new one in the ladder pool right now that's not this map. So this is one of the better maps for running a build like this because blinking back here is pretty hard, and so you can keep that covered pretty well. And the ramp into your main is really small, so you should be considering what maps you're going to be using builds like this on. Typically maps where you can protect two bases easier rather than a huge natural expand area. See something like that really old map, Daedalus. You don't want to really try it as much on there. So this is going to be an interesting play here. Zest is showing Stargate, and you might think like, what? Stargate in a fast expand doesn't really work that well. So Zest is going to get in here and scout, and this is what I'm talking about. If you see the Twilight Council, that can be a really good signal to go fast expand, because if you can get the Immortals up and be able to defend from any sort of blink play, as well as DT play that is possible, then you should be in great shape. So once Zest scouts the Twilight Council, he's going to be like, you know what, this doesn't make a lot of sense. I'm just going to cancel this Stargate, and I'm going to expand instead. So Mothership Core is on the way. She's out right now. Sentry is coming up, and he denies the rescout so that the probe from SOS doesn't really know what's going on, and he just drops his Nexus. So he's going to go ahead and put up a second Sentry. Here's the Robo right now that we talked about, and you want to temper your production based upon what your opponent is doing with his army. So Zest doesn't really know that much out on the map. I think his probe probably got killed. Let's check to see if it did. No, it looks like he just walked it home, because none of these units have any kills. So it looks like he's just going to do the same thing regardless. So one other aspect of safety this offers is if you don't know what's going on as far as whether it's Blink or DT, if you scout this Twilight Council, you can just look out for the little shimmer on the Dark Templar and drop a force field if that's what it comes down to. So yeah, I mean, that's another option. You don't always need to know what's going on with the army, but if you were able to see his army moving out or see nothing in his base, then you would know for sure you need to defend against an attack, and you need to Chrono Boost Immortals as fast as you can. So that's basically what we're going to see here. Nothing too terribly special or too different from the last game. But showing the Stargate and then switching into something else, it's kind of baiting SOS into doing what Zest wants, or what's going to favor Zest. And of course, something you can do if you get this really fast sentry is you can hallucinate Scout. So if he flies out here, he should have seen the pylon coming up here. He may have seen these units, I'm not sure. But he's definitely going to fly over these extra Stalkers and Mothership Core, and he's going to know for sure what's going on. So you can see right away, Immortal is what's coming out. And of course, if you do have a smaller ramp like this, you can actually start force fielding even before Blink is done, even though it is done. But they have to wait for their Mothership Core to get across the map to be able to spot. And if you ever have a decent amount of robot production and these 3 gateways, you should do decently against this. I mean, the only reason you should die is if you get like supply blocked, or if you really mess up your control, or something like that. This should favor you in most circumstances. So, Immortal's coming out now. You can see that this is the type of situation where he can just overcharge his main, considering it's really hard to get back here if you're SOS. So Zest can overcharge if he needs to. He just needs to focus on producing Immortals here and producing units off of his gateways and controlling those appropriately. So the overcharge comes down. SOS is trying to be a little greedy here, not exactly running away from a situation that doesn't favor him very well. And this force field, of course SOS can just blink past it, but that would put SOS on the bottom of the ramp and give SOS ramp control as well if he were able to do that. So notice that these small little plays with the force field are getting him in good situations. See, Immortals and stuff still pressuring just a little bit. He needs to be careful. You can't just chase him down as hard as you want. That's the other thing this is doing, is kind of forcing SOS to wait for his pylon for warp-ins here on the high ground. And SOS weirdly warps in sentries, knowing that he doesn't really have a lot of answers for this, other than maybe pushing the Immortal out of range. So if you see sentries, then don't be too overly eager about attacking this. The other thing is that Zest is also pulling probes, which we did see in the last game a little bit, and I didn't touch on it too much, but at this point, if you take a look at the worker count, most of these all-ins are going to come off of less than 25 workers. So if you can spend a few just to defend, you're still going to have these 2 Nexus up. As long as you don't lose basically everything, you should be fine. So these are pretty high-level things. Usually you should be able to push this away without having to pull probes, though. So Coming up here, you can see those force fields are just to push this away, so Zest should actually probably just walk away with this army right now. But he's saying, no, I'm just going to stay aggressive here. I'm going to use my Immortals, and I'm going to focus them together on individual targets, is what you should be doing. And at this point, the Immortals have done their job. They've killed a lot of Stalkers, and look at the unit count right now. Zest is really far ahead of SOS. And SOS is actually just coming down here to check to see if there's an extra base, and then he's going to leave, because there's not much he can do. So, yeah, he's just double checking that that's what this was. You can see the game timer is only another few seconds, so that's going to end the game here. We'll take a look at one more that's just a little bit different, but again, all these fast expand builds are going to be fairly similar. They're all going to be basically expand off of just a couple of units and get a robo up. So let me get this next one up here. You can see I have loads upon loads of replays. So that's how I have to get these started. I can't search through my client. It'll take me forever. So Squirtle versus Classic is going to be what we're watching now. Squirtle is going to be the fast expand player, and he's down here. So we will go ahead and skip forward to that. You can see this is another pretty short game because it's the all-in, or rather the expansion build holding off yet another all-in. So we will see that come up. And mostly I just want you guys to focus on the scouting reads here. And we can maybe make a little bit of different assumptions based upon if you scout something different. If you were to scout maybe a Stargate and you had a first couple of units, and it was about time to drop your expansion, you might consider just not dropping it, because one of the things this really struggles against is Stargate openers. So that's another option you can play if you can scout out that early enough, or at least get the information that might lead you to believe that. So you might consider not dropping your Nexus and maybe going for a Twilight Council of your own to counter the Stargate. There's a lot of different things you can do, but mostly you just need to know what the different reads mean from your opponent. And of course, most of the time these replays seem so linear because these pros make the same reads and they adjust based upon what they see. So Squirtle could even not be intending to go for this build and could be just adjusting into it based upon seeing something that prompted him to do that. So it's something we're not really taking into consideration, but something that might be worth noting. Now this is what I was talking about earlier. If you can hide your second pylon somewhere, they might freak out and think there's a proxy on the way and play a lot differently. So Classic, you'll see Squirtle's second pylon is here, and Classic really doesn't know. According to Classic, he's really only seen this one, and it's powering both buildings. So he might be thinking at this point, like, wait a minute, if there's a proxy out there somewhere, then I need to play defensively and I need to try and hold off that proxy back at my base, when in reality Squirtle's kind of using that against him and just putting a Nexus down instead. So there's a lot of tricky plays that you can use in order to trick your opponent and get a Nexus up without them really figuring out what's going on. You could even hide your pylon somewhere weird, like over here, and not do anything with it, and the better players will scout out that you only have one pylon supposedly in your main base and really think that that's something unusual and maybe overreact to it. So that's kind of what we're going to see a little bit out here at Classic. So Classic is being like, okay, where's your pylon? It's got to be around here somewhere. I know there's a pylon here. You can see, look at his scouting patterns. He's looking everywhere for this pylon when in reality it's just sitting right here. So while he's busy doing that, he's spending a lot of time looking around the map. Here's his Mothership Core seeking around, trying to figure out what's going on. And because of this, his Twilight Council is really late. You can even see he's on double gateways, and he's producing Stalkers and putting them in his mineral line because he thinks this is a proxy Stargate. So this is pretty funny about how one hidden pylon can really change the game this much to put it into Squirtle's favor. So Squirtle's Nexus is going to be super early, and Classic's going to finally figure out what's going on and be like, oh, I'm such an idiot. I should have realized that it was just a pylon somewhere on the map and it wasn't a proxy. And he would have known that if he just scouted a little bit further up here. As you can see, he still doesn't know. So that's just so funny that that's kind of the reaction that this garners. He's also saying that if it's a proxy, something probably would have happened by now. This is also keeping units back in his base. But he's saying if it was a proxy Stargate, something probably would have happened by now. So I really need to catch up here. He's going for 4-gate Blink. And he's going to be super aggressive, and Squirtle says, well, joke's on you, because my Nexus is already done. And Classic knows that now. So Squirtle has 3 sentries here. Of course, he did follow up with the Robo, like we've been talking about, and the 3 gateways. And he's going, actually, Observer first. He started out with an Observer because he wasn't totally sure what Classic was doing. And because Classic was still in his base, this could have meant something like DTs that he would have to protect against. So, starting out with the Observer here is fine in this circumstance, just because Classic has not shown any aggression quite yet. But then after this, you definitely want to get Immortals up, and notice how he's always chrono boosting this. He needs this to get out as soon as possible. So again, you can overcharge here. I think that was a little bit quick here from Squirtle, but he did just force field off the main ramp. You definitely never want to let this get out of control and have to defend both places at the same time. So he just drops a force field, overcharges. He's continuing to rally a couple of probes down here and there, but he's not getting too far ahead. He's stopping at 29, which is what we've talked about before. Don't really start going past that number until you either push this away or they've shown their own nexus, excuse me. So right now, a blink into the main is what's happening here from Classic. Squirtle just needs to not die, at least until this second Immortal comes out. So he's trying desperately to stay away from the army for as long as possible until then. And now Squirtle, or rather Classic, blinks on top of it, but the second Immortal pops out, and you want to use your Immortal to try and target down the most hurt Stalker. So this one's probably next. He misclicked right there. But either way, the fact that those two Immortals did their job. Look at the army compositions now. 2 Stalkers here, 4 Stalkers are just barely being warped in, and Squirtle still has all this stuff and another Immortal on the way. So Squirtle's in great shape. And it seems silly, but it was all just because he threw him off just a little bit with a kind of cute move of hiding the pylon here. And Classic's going to get up here and maybe finally realize that, oh geez, this is so dumb. I could have just scouted this out and totally changed this if I had realized that. But Squirtle really playing that to his benefit, getting the early Nexus up. And from this point, I mean, we can watch the rest of the game if you guys want. There's not really a whole lot to say because Classic just kind of slowly dies. He does try to get in here and be more annoying again, but your second overcharge should be about ready at maybe 840. A little bit sooner sometimes. You can see it'll almost line up to that, as 100 energy is what we're looking at. So yeah, there we go. And then once you get the next overcharge, I mean, you can push that away easily. Immortals continue to come out here, and there's not really a whole lot to say. Something else you could be doing and being cute with is if you have a lot of sentries that have a lot of energy, all you really need to do is put down Guardian Shields to protect against the Stalker damage. But if you had extra, you could hallucinate an Immortal to try and throw them off. Maybe they target the wrong Immortal down and waste some shots. A lot of options are there. So yeah, Squirtle is just going to start being aggressive here because he realizes that he has such a superior army at this point. With the additional Immortal rallying down here, and basically the same amount of production as Classic, except for he just has better units. So at this point, Classic doesn't really know what to do. He doesn't really have a ton of options. Squirtle can just push out, and sometimes you can even push across the map and kill them with this type of composition. But there's not much Classic can do right now. He's trying to target down the Immortals the best he can. That's something else I should mention, is try to keep your Immortals alive as long as possible. So yeah, once he pushes that reinforcing pylon out, he can go ahead and deny this as long as possible. Classic realizes it, just says, I'm dead. So, well played from all those players, and of course this is a very situational build, but it is something you can use and get adjusted to, especially in the lower leagues. If you have really crisp timings on everything and you can copy everything that you saw here, you shouldn't really have a lot of troubles. And of course, just because you die once from running a build like this to an all-in doesn't mean it's not viable. It could just mean that there's a subtle thing that you missed. Maybe you got supply block for a second, maybe you didn't put a force field on the ramp, something like that, that you can always clean up on. So this is a really solid PvP build that you guys might enjoy. So I hope you guys liked watching the footage of these players doing this really well. Of course, I'll always be back for more games and more replays and more videos, so look out for that in the future, but I'll see you later in the meantime.